What's up, y'all? So what we're going to be talking about today is something that is very, very interesting and something that black people have been talking about for the last 60 years. And it is, what ideology do you think was the better choice for black people? Martin Luther King versus Malcolm X. Martin Luther King being nonviolent, Malcolm X being someone that wanted us to achieve freedom by any means necessary. Martin Luther King being someone who was a integrationalist, wanting black people to be integrated into the larger American society, or Malcolm X, who wanted black people to be separate, who wanted black people to have our own, take care of our own, not look for white spaces, white approval, to only look for black spaces. So that's what the topic that we're going to be discussing. We're going to jump right in there. I'll see you guys in a second. What's up, y'all? This is Reggie White, aka Bullet, aka Speed and Bullet, and this is the Speed and Bullet podcast channel. Don't forget to like if you like these types of videos and you want us to keep this thing going. Don't forget to subscribe. By subscribing, you will get notified whenever we drop new videos, new materials, or whenever we go live. Also, don't forget to comment. Comment on the page. Let us know that you are here. Let us know that you are watching. Let us know your opinion on these subjects, and let us know where you're chiming in from: city, state, location, country. Let us know where you're chiming in from. And last, don't forget to share this video, share this page with people who may be interested in this type of conversation or may want to take part in some of the things that we're doing here on this channel. So what I want to talk about today is a interesting question throughout black circles and throughout really black history. And it is the question of whose ideology is, or was, or has been proven to be the correct course of action. Either Martin Luther King, or Malcolm X. And like I said, this is a conversation that happens a lot in the black community where there is comparisons and contrast, and some people have very, very, very strong opinions about which historical figure we should have followed then, should be taking notes from now. So I wanted to kind of dissect this topic, jump into it, and see what you guys thought. But before I, really jumped into it, I kind of wanted to highlight what I found as to be some similarities between Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. We all know about their differences and their philosophies on nonviolence, and Martin Luther King being a proponent of the nonviolent movement, and Malcolm X being against the nonviolent movement, and was more was more prone to be thought of as someone who was more radical, in the sense of he was not going to be abused or allow anyone to harm him or anyone that looked like him. But like I said, they did share a lot of similarities, especially when they started to branch out outside of the United States and started to see the world not necessarily through race, which is the central kind of dividing line in the United States, but throughout the world. Caste is the dividing line throughout the world. There are oppressors and there are those who are oppressed. So they were linked a lot, as they grew in their ideas and understanding of the world grew. But their personal lives actually did mirror each other quite a bit. Not only did their fathers have a lot in common, but their wives did also, to the point where I believe Coretta Scott King and Betty Shabazz both became friends later on in life after Martin Luther King and Malcolm X were both assassinated. They shared that, unfortunately, they shared that common bond. But the first thing we're going to talk about is just their fathers. I mean, both of their fathers were born in Georgia. Both of their fathers were Baptist minister. So Malcolm X, although he is known for his involvement with the Nation of Islam and also being a Sunni later on in life, his father Earl Little was a Baptist minister. He was active in the United Negro Improvement Association, and he was a supporter of Marcus Garvey. So this is one of the earliest kind of introduction into activism that Malcolm X had. Just floating around in his blood, in his genes, that activist mindset. But due to his father's activism and his father just not really wanting to subscribe to a lot of those norms of the time, a lot of white supremacists tormented him, his family, and it was suspected that he was killed by the Klan when Malcolm X was 6 years old. Now, on the other hand, Martin Luther King's father, like I said, was a Baptist minister also, and an activist also. He served as the head of the really famous Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, where Martin Luther King was, Martin Luther King Jr. After senior, both preached there. Raphael Warnock preaches there now, but very, very, very famous church in Atlanta. But also, Martin Luther King Sr. was, I think, president of the NAACP chapter in Atlanta. Was a member of the Civic and Political League, but he didn't, die a sudden, death. He lived to be, I believe, 85. So coming from very similar backgrounds, having similar fathers who were activists and folks who cared about the community, and also, folks who were involved in the community. They both married educated women. So during that time, as we all know, it was uncommon for black people to be educated. It was uncommon for really anyone to be educated, quite frankly, but very, very uncommon for black people to be educated, and even more uncommon for black women to be educated. But they both married educated women. I believe Betty Shabazz, she attended Tuskegee Institute in Alabama, and I believe she also attended Brooklyn State College, a school of nursing in New York City after that. So she grew up middle class, and had the ability to get educated. Coretta Scott King, also, she was educated. Also, she graduated top of her class in high school. She went to Antioch College in Ohio, and the New England Conservatory of Music in Boston. But why both of their husbands were activists, and they're very involved in the community and the struggle. Both of them served as as homemakers, but also as the strength behind both of these great men were these great women. But they were both, like I said, very educated and had a lot of talents and skills outside of being associated with their husbands, and both of them became activists and leaders after both of their husbands died. They took that activist voice and amplified it even more. Also, another similarity was recognition of the global aspects of oppression. Both men, as they grew older and experienced more of the world outside of the United States, they started to see it outside of the lens of black and white. And in the United States, that black and white lens is an easy way to identify the larger problems in the American society. But when these men traveled the world and they started to see other oppressed people, and even other oppressed people being oppressed by people that look like them, they started to realize that it wasn't specifically race as being a factor that that caused people to want to oppress black people. It was the desire to be on top, the desire to be on the top of the caste system. It just so happened that being black and looking different was an easier way to identify, um, that group, or the black race, as an easy identifier of different and of other, and but all in an effort to create a caste system, between those that have and those that don't. So the last kind of interesting fact that they both share in common is that they both were assassinated at the age of 39, which I thought was very, very interesting when I first learned that. Malcolm X was 4 years older than Martin Luther King. However, they both were assassinated at the age of 39. And just for historical record, Malcolm X was assassinated February 21st, 1965, and Martin Luther King was assassinated April 4th, 1968. I think Malcolm X being assassinated February 21st, I feel like we should have something to honor him that is very specific and coincides with Black history. But that's a whole different conversation. But Martin Luther King. I mean, Malcolm X was killed in Audubon Ballroom in Manhattan by some members of the Nation of Islam, as it's been suspected, and Martin Luther King was killed at the Rain Motel in Memphis, Tennessee, by James Earl Ray. And this was during the time where Martin Luther King was in town giving a speech in support of the striking black sanitation workers. The last thing is that both families were extremely, extremely unhappy with the investigation of both of their murders. It's been reported that Betty Shabazz had long held Louis Farrakhan as a person who was responsible for Malcolm X's death. Farrakhan has denied it, the person who so a couple people got arrested. I think 3 people got arrested for Malcolm X's murder. One of the men that confessed to the murder said that the 2 that were arrested didn't have anything to do with it. And last, with James Earl Ray, Coretta Scott King did not think that James Earl Ray was responsible for Martin Luther King's death. She did not believe that story, and spoke out about that a lot, about not really buying that he was the lone trigger man in Martin Luther King's assassination. So those are some of the similarities. I think that they're very interesting, but those are some of the similarities between Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. But it gives you an idea, with their background, with their fathers, with the women that they married, with their places in the civil rights movement, that their similarities need to be recognized before we start to talk about some of their differences. And when people think about how the civil rights movement formed, how it gained steam, and how it ultimately provided a mechanism and an environment for the civil rights bill, in black circles, there has been this debate on whose philosophy was right then. There was a lot of debate about who should be the voice and what tactic and method should be used in order for black people to gain the rights that that they deserve, just as being humans, but specifically being being citizens of the United States, having those rights being honored and consequences being given if those rights are violated and not being honored. But there was a lot of conversation just about whose philosophy was the correct one, and looking back at it, some 60 years later, I would say that there's still some debate about whose philosophy is the one that ultimately put us in the best position as black citizens. So the biggest difference between Martin Luther King and Malcolm X is not just the tactics of a nonviolent revolution. That's the easiest way to identify both of them because it's such a stark difference from each other. And in a lot of Malcolm X's speeches and things that he's written, he was very, very turned off by the fact that there were folks who were willing to be nonviolent in the face of extreme violence and extreme terror given towards black people. Martin Luther King, I think people don't really realize that Martin Luther King was not necessarily a proponent of nonviolence, but Martin Luther King was someone who figured that a nonviolent approach would be a way to shame the American people, but to be able to easily kind of identify what the problem is and how drastic and terrible the problem was by showing that even when you are nonviolent, these are the tactics that are used against you. You know, that there is violence, given to black people all the time. I mean, regardless of their position in society, regardless of their violent or non-violent, this is the way that black people are dealt with and handled. And he chose that as a way to be able to clearly show how terrible the treatment was for black people during that time. And let's be honest, it was terrible. Lynchings were common. The videos that you see with people being beat, police dogs, riot gear, water hoses, just brutality. I mean, just absolute brutality was shown towards the black people who were just nonviolent, just protesting through nonviolent means. Malcolm X, on the other hand, was what they considered back then more radical, in the sense of he was not taking a punch. If you punched him, he was going to punch back, and vice versa. And he felt like that was a human right to defend yourself, a human right to not be subject to someone's violence towards you. And Malcolm X famously said that as a black person, we're going to protect ourselves, and we need to protect ourselves, especially in a country where it has already been shown that your rights will not be upheld by the government, by police. So you have responsibility to protect yourself, and to do that by any means necessary. That was his most kind of famous saying, but also just his philosophy about not taking the violence that was given towards black people during that time. So Malcolm X was assassinated before the Civil Rights Bill was signed. Martin Luther King was also, but both of them were instrumental in bringing awareness, bringing energy, bringing spirit to this movement, and having contributed to it, greatly in the 60s and the late 50s. I think that the other major difference between Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, and this is the one that most people argue about to this day, is the difference in integration versus separation. Martin Luther King was a person who wanted black people to be integrated into the United States, into the fabric and the culture of the United States and of the American way of life. And one of the reasons why is because Martin Luther King felt like black people built this country, so we should reap the benefits of this country, and we should not end up just end up not having a major part in the continuous building of this country, that we should be involved in it. Uh, we should have the same rights in this country, because we are really the backbone and the fabric of American life, of the American way of life. So Martin Luther King was, and he was someone that wanted black people to be integrated. He famously said that, in his "I Have a Dream" speech, that one day he wants, young black boys and young white kids, or young black children and young white children, to be able to live and play and just be living in a country that honored both of those folks. And that was his dream, for everything to be integrated. Malcolm X was totally different. Although he had a global conscience that went beyond black and white and understood that it was about oppression and oppressors, he understood the history of the United States, made it so we had to deal with the race issue before we could even move on from anything else. But Malcolm X wanted us to be separate. His philosophy was, black people should not have to, or black people should not have to go to the white establishment in order to gain certain things, in order to achieve certain things. They should not have to. They should not have to base their worth on white approval. That we should be separate. And he even talked about having a separate state, a separate country. I know he was like, send us back, whatever. But Malcolm X was about black people, taking care of black people. He wasn't about getting a handout. He was about black people being men, being women, but doing this specifically in a circle of blackness. And that was really his biggest and strongest opinion about how black people should be moving forward in the United States. That we should be trying to get our own stuff. We should be trying to own our own things so we can be self-sufficient as a people. And we, the more self-sufficient we are as people, the less we will, the less we will want to or have to be integrated into the American society. Like, y'all white people don't want us here. Okay, we don't want to be here either. So let's build our own. So we don't have to be subject to y'all laws. We don't have to be subject to to y'all discriminatory practices. We don't have to be subject to y'all racism. We don't have to be subject to y'all violence. Let's just get our own stuff and we'll be separate. And then, you guys can live over there and do your thing. We can live over here and do our thing. But integration was and could never, be fully achieved in the United States. So those are the two arguments. So before I go any further, I just want to kind of ask the question to the group. So, what is your general feeling about both movements, about the nonviolent integration movement of Martin Luther King versus the defense separation movement of Malcolm X? So what are your feelings about the two? Do you agree with Martin Luther King that being integrated into the American society will be the best course of action for black people? Or do you agree with Malcolm X that black people should be trying to gain our own, do our things separately, not have to be subject to white approval, that the more we do things on our own, the more we will be kind of separate from having to live in white spaces and have to operate in white spaces that are a lot of times not safe for black people? That the more we develop that, the easier it will be for us to gain our full independence. That it should not be subject to white approval or white acceptance. So how do you guys feel? Which one do you guys agree with? The next question that I'm going to kind of ask you guys is going to be, So Martin Luther King is probably, not probably, he's much more famous than Malcolm X, and much more famous in the sense of his place in not only Black history, but also American history. He has a holiday. January 15th is his birthday, so it's always a day off for his birthday. So a holiday was given in his honor, although he was not honored while he was alive. But his contribution years later was recognized to the point where I believe it's a federal holiday and it's universally recognized throughout the United States. So Martin Luther King is the more famous of the two. I think that both of their names are recognizable between everyone, in the Black community, and probably most other communities. Everyone will recognize Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. But Martin Luther King has been he's been an icon, in American history and Black history, much more than Malcolm X has. But when you think about where we've gone in the last 60 years, do you think that Malcolm X's philosophy of separation would have put us in a better position as a whole than Martin Luther King's integration ideology? Do you think that if that was the focus, that if the focus was not to gain approval in white spaces, but the goal was to create Black spaces that were separate from white spaces, would we as Black people, and I mean Black people as a whole in general, would we be further as a group, as a community, but also would the relations between Black people and white people and others, and racism and things of that nature, would that be looked at differently if we followed Malcolm X's philosophy versus Martin Luther King's philosophy? And I think it's an interesting argument. One of the things that I think about is there was a desire, and I think that there's really good arguments on both sides. So at one point, and I am personally a product of this, because we live in such a white supremacist, white dominated, white acceptant country and American culture, that it's easy to dismiss your Blackness in order to fit into those white spaces. And I think that if you're someone that feels like the American dream, air quote, is something that binds us all as Americans, that being integrated into the larger American society is what Black people should be trying to do. In a large sense of that, well, in a small sense, I agree. I mean, I agree that there are spaces where integration is needed, and integration is a is a useful tool and a useful tactic. But I can understand how, when you look at Black wealth, you look at Black community, and you look at how the world changed after Black integration started. Before Black integration, there wasn't a lot of social movement of Black people. There wasn't a lot of social movement. So and when I mean social movement, I mean we weren't able to go to a large majority of Black people weren't able to move freely, move into different neighborhoods, move into neighborhoods that were predominantly white. We weren't able to move into areas that were predominantly white. We had to stay in our small areas. Now, what that created was an environment where all Black people live in the same spaces. They live for the most part in the same communities. And what that did was that concentrated the black wealth to those particular areas. So the stores were black, the newspapers were black, the merchant districts were black. There wasn't a lot of integration into those spaces, and there wasn't a removal of black wealth from black spaces, to go to suburbs to white spaces. And what that created, a lot of what that created was black wealth being moved to other communities, and those communities being uplifted from that black wealth when integration became a real thing. You may have had a doctor, a lawyer, or some type of business person, and now that energy, that tangible person, that tangible energy of this black doctor, black lawyer, black business person was now taken out of the black community, and now it became a part of other communities. And what that left was a void of not only just leadership, but a void of tangible examples of black excellence. The goal of black people started to become to be in more white spaces. The goal ended up trying to get out of black spaces and into white spaces. And what that left was, if all of the talent, the education, the wealth left black spaces, and now they started to integrate into white spaces, what did that leave? That left the black neighborhoods being devoid of those positive examples. So that is one of the arguments against integration, is because of the white supremacist, white dominated ideology of the American culture that created an understanding, an innate understanding that white was better, that being around white people was the better choice, being around white people was the more desirable or favorable place to be. And that created a whole generation of people that just wanted, that their goals, and you haven't down it, their goal is just to leave the black community. It doesn't even matter where they go. Just, I gotta get out. I gotta get out. I gotta get out. That is the philosophy, And like I said, when you take all of that talent and all of that good energy out of black communities, now all you're left with is a lot of the negative energy that we know today is very prevalent in black communities. So that is the argument against integration. So the argument against that's the argument too, and against integration. But the argument, the pros and cons argument of separation is a very kind of simple, and this is more of my argument. It's very kind of simple and basic. It's very difficult to be totally separate as black people in the United States, because we are still American citizens and we still pay American taxes, and it's very, very difficult to try to carve out something very, very specific. Now, there have been times where communities of black people have been carved out, and unfortunately all of those communities have been destroyed by white violence, by white fear, and by white terror. So I mean, that in itself makes it difficult. So separation, because we are still Americans and still American citizens, it can be it's tricky and it's dicey. But my kind of biggest example of why I don't really totally agree with separation, and I do understand that there should be a focus of black wealth, and there should be a focus of supporting black people, supporting black business. That should be the focus. However, I think that when we think about separation, how separation looks, in the United States, we already have a clear example of what separation looks like. And the example is the Native Americans. And this is in no way, shape, or form any dig, critique, or criticism of Native Americans, of what they've endured through the terror of the United States, terror of the United States government. The stealing of the land, the killing. This is in no way, shape, or form, any type of criticism to Native American people. This is criticism of the American government and criticism of the feeble attempts to to separate Native Americans from American society. But when I think of separation in the American sense, what I think about is, what does separation look like for the Native Americans? And is that a separation that Black people would like to have? And when I say that, and with all due respect, life on Native American reservations are described as terrible. They're described as not having resources. They're described as being unsafe. They're described as being exploitive. They're described as just not really being places that people really want to be. So they are separate. They have land. They have some rights. They have they're separate. But would you rather that be the lifestyle, or would you like for that to be the end result of Black people being separate from American society, from American culture? How would that look? And it's easy to say, well, if we were separate, we would do it different. If we were separate, it wouldn't be like Native American reservations. We would have X, Y, Z. And I think that is that's a fairly decent argument, that we may do it differently, or we may do it better. But I can only go by what I see, and what I see is Native Americans are separate. They have their separate land. They have things that are separate, but life as a Native American doesn't appear to be well. It doesn't appear to be positive. It doesn't appear to be. It doesn't appear that they have the resources that they need. It doesn't appear that they are really successful as an overall. Maybe I'm wrong. I mean, maybe someone can educate me more on this fact. But what I have read, what I have seen is that Native American reservations are not really good places to be. So that is the biggest argument against separation is, what does that look like? What does that look like, in this country that we call the United States? What does separation look like? And what does like total separation look like? And is that how you would like for Black people to be? Is that how you would like for us to be, in comparison to the Native Americans, who have achieved some type of separation? They've achieved reparations. They've been given land, but it doesn't appear that they have gained any more successes, as a result of that. So I'm curious to see what you guys think. I'll ask the question just once again. I mean, how do you guys feel about the philosophies and ideologies of Martin Luther King? Martin Luther King being someone that was an integrationalist, someone that wanted Black people to be integrated into the larger American culture, American society. And Malcolm X, who was a separatist, who wanted Black people to have their own, to not seek approval in white spaces, to make sure that they take care of themselves and take care of Black people first and foremost. But also, how do you guys feel about Martin Luther King and his nonviolent approach versus Malcolm X and his by any means necessary approach? So I'm looking forward to seeing these answers to these questions. But if you haven't, don't forget to subscribe. Subscribe to this channel. Let us know that you're here. Let us know that these topics are something that you guys want to take part in. Don't forget to like these videos. Get the algorithm going. Let YouTube and wherever these videos are on these platforms, let them know that you guys are here, that you guys are listening to it. I think I already said subscribe. Don't forget to comment. Answer these questions. Let us know how you think. Let us know how you feel. This is a whole community of conversation, of people like myself, like-minded people who have questions, who have answers, who have opinions. Use this platform as a place in order to give those opinions. Excuse me. And don't forget to share this channel with other people, with friends, with family, with people that you think that might have some interest in these types of conversations. Some people that you think might want to take part in these conversations, listen to these videos, watch these videos, participate. Don't forget to share this with anybody that you think might find some value in it. So I'm going to leave you guys at that. I appreciate you guys tuning in. Thanks a lot. Peace.